I am a man of constant sorrow. I've seen troubles all in my day. I bid farewell to old Kentucky, the place where I was born and raised. For 6 long years I had to ramble, no place that I could call my own, place that he can call his own. Ah, missed you guys. Most importantly, I miss my partner, Judas Chew. If you're watching, hang in there, buddy. I'm working on getting our problems fixed. I'll talk about it more on Cow Talk if that continues when that starts back up. Stay tuned. I know I say stay tuned, stay tuned. When I was younger, I used to think I had a serious mental problem. Then I realized I have 50 projects that I want to do at any given time. I want to do them at the same time. And if I'm at least working on a quarter of those, which is hard to work on just a quarter of those, I'm at least doing something. But if I'm working on none of them, then I am getting arrested more and more by the things I'm leaving behind, as opposed to being liberated by leaving them behind. So something that's very important is that you process things. I hadn't been processing things properly. I had a mental breakdown. I dropped out of a lot of things and went on the bare bones, bare minimum, backup power sort of settings. And we'll just leave it at that until we elaborate on that a little bit more in the future. So Futurama has some real banger moments when it contrasts things happening today with future projection, right? So I think the word projection is very imperative right there. Sometimes it's genuinely intuitive, but that's just by looking into what's already there, you can determine what's to come. Like Farnsworth saying they renamed Uranus because it was silly, and now they call it Eurectum. That's a good bit. That's a good bit. I think it's the same thing that killed the organic humor of The Simpsons is what killed the Futurama update, the reboot. Something South Park used to do good, but now falls flat on, which is having your script just be current thing, current thing, current thing. Like, yeah, media influences psychology, even as cartoons. Life imitates art. But y'all suck at your art these days. It's like looking at old The Onion and looking at Onion now. Y'all suck at your art these days. A lot of the people who thought that they were the masters of the universe inherited the levers of power, inherited the reins of this chariot that we're all passage to, and they've just been driving us into the ditch. So, people gotta get that. You gotta get that back, Get back that human thing where you're doing something for the people around you and it makes you feel good. And then you grow a better society in the long term, and then you feel good about it. Instead, people are just feeling bad their entire lives. They indulge in the death drive. They make other people poor when they don't need to so that they can feel better about being rich. In reality, spiritually, they make themselves poor, and they make the rest of the world more devoid of potential. It's, like people like Bill Gates spraying glyphosate everywhere. That herbicide is going to kill everything, not just the crops that people eat. It's going to turn the world into a barren wasteland at the rate at which it's being distributed in about 100 years. That's my guess. People want to talk about climate apocalypticism. But in reality, the psychology that they're noting there is the sort of Jewish apocalypticism that is shot through almost every single culture, and most especially the Jewish apocalypticism of Revelations and Calvinism and Protestantism and Mormonism and Freemasonry. That's what especially it's shot through in the modern psychology and the culture. It is what it is, But back to the cartoons. Yeah, life imitates art. And cartoons, plays, it's all the same. But anyways, politics, politics, politics. While we're on the subject, never allow anybody to gaslight you into thinking Obama wasn't that bad, right? I'll actually go out on a limb and die on a hill that's completely not worth dying on. But I'll say it for the sake of truth. Biden is easier to defend than Obama. The answer is obvious. The reason is pretty clear. It's because Obama was sharp as a whip and Biden's brain was failing. It's that simple. That's all it boils down to. And the fact that Obama was a two-term president who did a majority of the bad things that he did in his second term. Excuse me, Obama was a two-term president, a majority of the bad things he did in the second term, and Biden was a first-term president, one-term president. Which is apparently something that if you're like an upper class, you look down on one-term presidents. You're like, oh, the president for one term. Charlotte's child was president for 2 terms. He started 4 wars, right? Syria, Libya, Yemen. All of those are very relevant to what Israel is doing today. He also started the war in Somalia, also relevant to the Gulf and trade running through the Gulf of Aden and the Suez Canal, the general area. So, yes, Biden allowed the event of October 7th, very similar to 9/11, happy anniversary, to allow us to do something completely terrible to people who weren't responsible. But Obama knew what he was doing and didn't need any false flags in order to do that. So don't let people convince you that he was no big deal or one of the middle ground ones or even one of the better ones like Lincoln. No, 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 no. Oh, gosh. It's people like Obama that make people question Lincoln. In reality, there's nothing really to question there, but it's people like Obama that do make us question whether or not that was the right path. Right? Because there's no such thing as a black Illuminati. There's no such thing as a black Illuminati. I'm searching all the records. Does not come up. Doesn't exist. It's not real. What it is, can we play 2? And what these Freemasons have formed their ideologies off of is a purity that goes even beyond racial purity, which they clutch to. Jewish people clutch to racial purity. The High German Command clutch to racial purity. The English clutch to racial purity. They're all inbred mutts. But they clutch to their idealized they clutch to their ideologized version of a pure race because the sort of thought of miscegenation, anti-miscegenation specifically, and Calvinist purity politics is that of you are the light of the world, be the light you want to see in the world, and the other people who don't believe, those are children of darkness. That is Calvinist theology 101. That is Jewish theology 101. That's the most basic foundational building block on which everything else is built on top of. And it's very easy to fall into that. It's very easy to slip back into pagan thinking. But, you see, the Chinese are going to beat us at our current rate. I'm okay with this. Anybody who's not okay with this is just aggrieved and they're clutching on to their pearls. But in reality, it's not going to matter. The reason why Jewish people are dominating European society, the reason why the Chinese are going to win in the long run, is because these are cultures derived from the Bronze Age that make plans in generations. They make plans in 100 years. We, Christians, made plans in thousands of years. But we modern liberal subjects commiserated all together. We make plans in days. We make plans in weeks or months. We don't even make plans in years. We struggle to make plans in semesters, That's what it boils down to. That's what it boils down to. Christianity was better, and it subjugated the East, and it subjugated Judaism, and it effectively subjugated Africa, even though Africa, has its whole can of worms. It's big, very populous place. But it subjugated China as a monolith, as the closest thing to a monolith that you're going to come around to in society. Every society has its breaking points. The fact that they can unify over and over and over again shows you that there's some contiguous, outline in between the outline of most of China. that makes it kind of a monolith. Jewish people are not a monolith, but it's fascinating how financially they will operate as a culture and a people, and operating uh, on behalf of their own people, which would be called racist if a white person would say that you should do this and that I'm going to do this, it would be called racist. The reason why is because that is exactly how they get us to take down from making plans in thousands of years through Christianity, which is quite literally the first 1,000 years was the year of Christ. The second 1,000 years was the years of Christ and the Antichrist battling. And this third 1,000 years is now the time of the Antichrist. That's what a lot of people say. Christianity does, but this is only in Christianity. And one can see it with a lot of forms of Protestantism, that it is evil. Evil. You can see this. And you can see this in the modern form of Catholicism, that it is evil. You can see this. Doesn't mean that all the Protestants and all the Catholics are evil. But there's also a highly corrupt Orthodox Church, which is undergoing a civil war that's just draining all of its manpower out so that it can't, keep up in this middle ground anymore. Effectively, Christianity is being shunted into an evil culture. But that's if the 1,000-year plans keep on going. I guarantee you, if the parasite consumes the host body here in the West, then China will just win. And, we may have a plan to nuke all the dirty Chi-Coms. Okay, fine. Do that, and then what? Still going to lose. Still a bad sports, desperate last gasp at some level of equalization after getting absolutely and utterly humiliated. You deserve better than that. You deserve better than that, America. And I intend on giving that to you. Vote Wolf Tone 2032. I won't even be old enough then. But hey, let's keep things in context here. So al-Awlaki's entire family was American, and Obama drone struck and killed Anwar al-Awlaki's entire family, despite them having American citizenship. He threw out due process. When Trump throws out due process involving Venezuela, involving anything, he's doing this because Obama already opened the door. I guarantee you. It might have happened otherwise. It's already 100 times easier because Obama opened the door and nobody did anything about it. And so there's legal precedent. And not only is there legal precedent, there's moral precedent for the leader to do this because nobody said it was wrong. In fact, when you say it's wrong now, you more make it look like you're saying Trump is wrong instead of the issue, which is ad hominem. It's a fallacy. It doesn't stand up on its merits. No highly educated person would take that seriously. That's the thing. So after he was president, he also joked about killing Anwar al-Awlaki. Classy. After being president, he turned Chicago into a war zone, something that Trump's National Guard Corps is gearing up to engage with. That's going to be crazy. As well as bulldozing an entire beautiful natural park to build his gay little presidential library, vanity project trophy. Something the Trump administration also does, but still. The sheer ignorance around the environment is astounding. But it's all by design. In Nova Scotia, they're gearing up to blanket like 10,000 acres with glyphosate, something that just obliterates our baby's life and increases the chance of fires and gives people cancer. And who's doing that? The Department of the Environment and Climate Change in Canada is doing that. Absolutely insane psyop to get people on board with an environmentalist in name-only group and do the exact opposite of what was promised and proposed. But I digress. That's the interesting thing, is it's not going to come from any sort of political movement. Arguing between Republicans and Democrats in America is quite literally arguing the difference between people who like to molest little girls and people who like to molest little boys. And I would say that with my hand on the Bible because that's the God's honest truth. Anybody trying to say one side is so terrible, ergo we should all be the most dedicated versions of this side possible, is a grifter scam artist. And I think we've actually started to pass the point where any of that is actually relevant. And what I want to do is just continue the process by which intelligence is pushed to where it's supposed to be, where we should be, where our ancestors were. We've fallen way, way behind. Yeah, our ancestors had some mythical thinking, but we have fallen so far behind in pragmatic, practical, common sense. So far behind. We think we're so smart. We didn't know our ass from a hole in the ground. Obama drastically redefined congressional politics and oversaw a mass purging of critics. Like 1,000 critics of Israel were excluded from Congress during his 8 years. While Trump says he does that, he actually does it at a tremendously lower rate. And like Bush before him, he just took a gigantic dump on the Constitution, which continues to haunt our politics to this very day. I will say, he was actually pretty good on deportations. He deported over 2 million people, something Biden was horrible about. Biden let in like 15 million people from the looks of it. Insane. Those poor people, a lot of them are being rounded up and sold as slaves. So I hope nobody ever trusts American immigration authorities, whether they call themselves Christian or not. I hope nobody ever trusts American immigration authorities again. Because what? You're going to come here and going to live in a ghetto and that's going to be better than where you're living at right now? Chances are, nah. Chances are it's not. Chances are all the flaming hoops that you have to jump through and all the time that you waste is actually very likely worse for your overall life and where you would be if you didn't have it. Then going through the process and coming to America and living in some Section 8 rent-controlled housing in some crackhead and getting addicted to drugs and having your children join gangs. Like, trust me, it's better to just be martyred in the middle of the desert than to sell your soul and have your kids go down the river. Just putting the things on the graph, you know. People aren't going to like everything that I have to say. I'm going to say it either way if I can confirm that it's true and can say it, this is true. Now, if it's not true, if I think it's on the fence a little bit, I'll say that. But there's a lot of things out there that I say that is very uncomfortable for some people that are 100% true. You're not going to find your salvation in a political party in America. You're not going to find your salvation in America. And you're not going to find your salvation in another country. You're going to find your salvation in Christ, who lives within the faithful. Now, it helps to recreate the Last Supper during your Mass. I don't think that's necessary. It's really nice. It's really helpful, but I don't think that's necessary. I think some of the greatest Christian moments were literal, actual Sermon on the Mount moments in the middle of a forest, stuff like that, which is a continuation of the religious ecstasy of the pagans, believe it or not. But that is still, there's a lot of stuff that Catholicism took from paganism, which is something that Protestants call out all the time in Catholicism, that was true, that it took, and it continued on through it. Super ironic that Protestants forgot what paganism was and then immediately turned into Nazis in Germany. Really ironic, although I will say the Nazis killed a lot of Catholics, so got to put that out there. You know who brought in most of the 60 million immigrants in our country? W. Biden was pretty bad, but the entire Bush family essentially laid the pavement for migration from Mexico into the U.S. and also for drug trafficking into Florida. And that was the Bush family specialty, as well as the complete and utter destruction of Texas, turning it into a third world shithole. That's what Texas is right now, a third world shithole with a few suburbs, like every other third world shithole has a few suburbs with money in it. Texas is a third world shithole. Pardon my French. It's not exclusively Mexicans or Mexico's fault. This was very good for the cartels, who Bill Clinton also gave a huge stipend to for helping to move cocaine and crack into the country. Ultimately, the people mostly at fault are the Sodom and Gomorrahites that benefited the most from these politics, quid pro quo, which mostly trends towards pointing towards Israel as a central support beam, not the exclusive support beam, but a central support beam for these policies. I genuinely do believe that the reason why Israel is going into a Nazi blitzkrieg, complete with Dr. Mengele experiments in concentration camps and mass starvation, the whole 9 yards, is because Trump has been upsetting the apple cart so much that their brain over brawn style plans and propaganda is failing, mostly thanks to the internet. Which is why Microsoft is breaking everything and AI is getting trillions in investments when all it does is gunk up the works, which is by design. It's by design. Oh, and I talked with somebody who's into AI on my podcast a little while ago. It wasn't very good, but I'm going to have him on again so we can fix the issues that we were dealing with. I'm just not ready for the podcast. I got this nice little stream here. I wasn't ready for the podcast. I'm getting ready. I got a lot of notes in order. I got a lot of stuff. I'm cleaning, exercising, organizing stuff, doing stuff that I had been holding back on for like almost a year now because I've been doing my show constantly. And then I had bad things happen in the last couple of months. Now I'm ready. But, if Judas doesn't want to stream with me, I could be a good streamer and he could be a good streamer and we could be friends. And that's enough for me. I would love to work with him, though. I think he's a great guy. I already said that. Anyways. Yeah, he's pretty smart, and I enjoy talking to him. So check out Harm on AI. Also, Mexicans get a bad rap. They're not perfect, but they're better by a factor of 5 than Indians from India. Not the base Native Americans, mind you. Indians are here to overturn our culture, which is founded, or at least at one point, on Christianity. They're being sent in programs funded by their government specifically to take over communities and politics they never have had attachments to. Their Brahmin liquidate everything they get their hands on at an incredible rate because they're not attached to worldly goods. They are a very capable priestly caste, and they liquidate everything they get their hands on. Their culture is a negative trust, negative empathy culture, and they give absolutely nothing back, unlike Hispanics who give a tremendous amount back to first European culture with the Reconquista, but more than in diet and in religion. Like, their food is amazing, and if it wasn't for the food brought up through the Iberian Peninsula, think about British food. It would have been a lot worse. It would have been a lot worse. You know who I really hate? You know what I really hate? Horoscope astrology. You know what I really love? Carl Jung's Aeon-style zodiacal astrology that did paint in the book Aeon, A-I-O-N, Christianity as a 1,000-year, taking plans in 1,000-year blocks culture, which is derived from the highest castes of ancient religion, such as Zoroastrianism and Abrahamism. And Islam kind of sucks, but it's a religion of wealth and material, right? So the same failings we've seen in Islam, we're going to see in the descendants of Israel, because they are a very material religion, and that prevents their holy men from being able to operate as efficiently. It's absolutely true that the ancient Hebrews had some level of Indo-European admixture, likely Indo-Iranian/Caucasian admixture. That's why many Lithuanians and Celts look so similar and get claimed by the Zionist entity. We're both actually Iron Age diasporas of the movement of humanity. So I would assume that when the Indo-Europeans were first making it around the Black Sea, the spread down one side influenced Middle Eastern culture. The spread up the other influenced European culture. And you have the Lithuanians first, and then you got the Goidelics way over on the side, which are mostly Neanderthal, Ogaden, And then you have the Celts who go all the way up and they mix and they create what's known as a Pict in the British Isles, um, mostly Britain, and an Ivernian, which is a misnomer of Hibernian, like hibernate, in Ireland proper. Um, you got Uralic blood, specifically a high Neanderthal admixture in the Uralic Mountains. And I think that might even be like a different type of Homo sapien, but it gets very confusing, and it's not a set in stone science about exactly where people were at what time, right? We have a little bit of archaeological evidence dating certain time frames, but that's about it. We kind of have to fill the gaps in. That Iron Age diaspora. You know, remember how I said that Chinese was a Bronze Age culture. Ancient Canaanite is also a Bronze Age culture. David's Israel, Iron Age culture. Lithuanians, Iron Age culture. Ancient Irish, Iron Age culture. The Celts themselves, a late Iron Age culture, effectively bringing the knowledge. It's actually not really a late Iron Age culture, an official Iron Age culture. The previous ones were early Iron Age cultures. What the Celts did is they went around tin deposits. They took salt, they used it in their army, and they found tin deposits. Wherever there were tin deposits, that's why Cornwall is a Celtic stronghold, they would set up shop. And they would bring Iron Age technology to their areas as massively important traders in the region. And that's why you have very similar, features, shapes of the skull, size of the nose. One big thing about Celts is they have button noses, which are, honk honk clown noses. And that is actually very unique to Celtic people. There's almost no other people on Earth that have the honk honk button clown noses like we do. But it kind of, with the size of it, kind of makes us look Jewish in a way, but we're not. And Ireland and Israel have some of the worst bad blood in the current. And there's history to that. I've been over the history of that on the show, but Brian Boru was High King that unified Ireland, and High King Turlebach was the person who expelled the Jews from Ireland as they were showing up on the shores. He's just like, nope, I don't want your gifts. Get out. They all came in under Denmark, and then the Danish king sent them over to different kingdoms to try and metastasize that culture. Ugh. Terrible stuff. That's where the Vikings came from, and it's no joke. The Vikings were nasty, brutish thugs, mercenaries sent to rape and pillage. That's what the Vikings were. There's no nobility in a Viking. In fact, Viking is a verb. There's lots of nobility in German paganism. There's no nobility in a Viking. And that's exactly why these Viking LARPer movements are like really ascendant right now. Specifically because of that exact thing. You got to say, nope, I don't want your gifts. Get out. Something that I really wish Noel would have done. It's not too late. It's not too late. It's not too late. It's not too late. Now, the Arabs seemingly have next to no Indo-European admixture, which technically makes them the true Shemites, or as we like to call them today, Semites. But you can know true Scotsman anything to a terminal degree. Best to judge individually based on actions. Still, I enjoy being able to map out all the genetic facial features in my head so that I need not even check the early life section of Wikipedia, as that isn't as sound as the surety of studious scrutiny. I've come to the conclusion in recent months, mostly from studying Israeli society, culture, and psychology, that secularism, which is, if you don't know the definition of secularism is the belief that it's basically separation of church and state at its in action. It is that every single religion can coexist. Think of that old bumper sticker, coexist peacefully. At the same time, as well as being open to which is basically already where you're at. But to force it by law is to decouple the religion from the state. That's why I'm saying secularism is basically in motion disestablishmentarianism. So now that's been now that's been defined. Secularism, I believe, is an insidious poison that creeps into a culture's religion, the literal foundation and connective tissue of their society, and starts rusting it internally with little outward signs of damage until it starts to fall apart. You just put your hand through it and it just goes right through. Until it starts to fall apart at the seams. That doesn't mean that most religions don't have some value in them, right? I am of the theory, I would love to talk to people who would study this and believe this and debate them if they mean this, they believe this, that the religions manifest based on their environment, that India creates Hinduism, that the Middle East creates Islam, that Europe creates Christianity. I would love to have like a long conversation or back and forth or debate with somebody who genuinely believes that and studies that and preaches that and you know, a true blue secularist. I'd love to have a debate with one. But that's not what secularism is in motion, right? And you see this a lot with Pope Francis, well, Bergoglio, trying to honor all the religions in the Basilica of St. Peter, you know? It's not about respect. It's about egalitarianism. If you don't want egalitarianism is flattening out everything. So some things are up here, around there, some things are already in the middle, some things are down there. Everything gets flattened out. Now, everybody is exactly the same. Nobody is unique. And I'm not sure how that robotic, ultra left-brained philosophy can appeal to people, but apparently it appeals to some highly autistic people. Egalitarianism is a farce. Everything will naturally, you flatten out the sand in the Zen garden. You know, it will start to manifest waves again by the wind in time. It's just the natural cycle of things. But as most great scholars of Catholicism were wont to do, they would take things from other religions and incorporate them into Catholicism, and that would still be Catholicism. Most importantly, because it revolved around the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. That's what made it so important. I think it was a very bad decision, but probably a deliberate decision to take Jesus Christ off of the cross in Protestantism. Now, the parent's mind might say, oh, no, we don't have to expose our children to that. But in reality, then they bring in the rock and roll, and then they go see violent movies on the TV at the end of the day. Well, you know, are you sure about that? Are you sure that taking Christ off the cross was about, you know, nonviolence? Are you sure about that? Because I think Christ being there on the cross suffering is the biggest testament to nonviolence you could have. The world's, you know, people are going to scrape their knee sometime. The world's a tough place sometimes. And you just gotta, you know, can't helicopter parent shelter your child for all eternity. They will end up screwed up. So, I think the root of it is environment when it comes to people behaving and learning the way that they do. And I'd love to have a debate of somebody that says that that's like a Calvinist concrete notion, like a foundation. From environment, which is one of the clearest ways of interpreting how God talks, we arise religious experience. And a lot of those are from specific type of psychedelics that grow in the region, whether they are ayahuasca, whether they are psilocybin mushrooms, whether they are in India, marijuana, which is where the Indo-Europeans brought it up from into Europe, was from India. Whether it's from the burning bush, what was that, acacia? Whether it's from the fungus that grows on the top of rye, you know, LSD. From nature derives these psychedelics, which people say and people have used in their priestly castes throughout all of human history, probably starting with the apple likely being iboga, has used to create a priestly caste and a priestly conceptualization, right? So the environment, through the translation of psychedelics, teaches us how God talks as a burning bush. And we arise religious experiences. And those are passed along through new languages formed to capture the concepts derived from one person to another the best they can. They create new words to capture these concepts that are popping into their head, that feel like they were always there and always made sense, but just needed something to help them pass through into their head. Now, it gets a little wishy-washy at this point, because when you talk about things like the preternatural and the supernatural, we're here in the natural. When you talk about the preternatural, you can sound very schizophrenic sometimes, although a lot of people will understand what you're saying. When you talk about the supernatural, oftentimes, unless you have had a intimate supernatural experience, people will not know what the hell you're talking about. What do you mean by entities? I thought God was a monad. And are you sure that's not demonic possession? You know what? MK Ultra experimented a lot with psychedelics and influencing people, and I think that you can effectively make somebody receptive towards demonic possession through psychedelics. I think MK Ultra has shown the world that exact thing. And today, 20, 30 years later, now you got people, like a quarter of the population of the United States, taking some form of psychoactive over-the-counter medication, or not under-the-counter medication, some form of pharmaceutical, right? So don't go, oh, what do you mean? Yes, drugs can cause somebody to be susceptible to supernatural things. That's why oftentimes we view psychedelics as a preternatural manifestation, and why a lot of times we consent to legalizing that in the same way that we consented to throwing Christ off of the cross. And so we have these religious experiences from nature. God talks to us through his language, through his creation. We create new language so that we can talk to each other and share these concepts that we derived the best that we can, the best that we can try to project our thoughts onto them. And then we form language groups. And that's why language groups are different, because they had different mechanisms. Even though they're the same thing, they had different mechanisms by which they manifested and diversified. And society arises thereafter in unique manifestations built on that foundation. Secularism is a factor of proto-communism alchemical liquidation or liquefaction of the religion underneath culture and society. Atheism and secularism are the war masters of communism. Atheism and secularism. Secularism, the hand that gives, and atheism is the hand that takes away. And when combined, they make a perfectly red society, because you can have whatever religion you want, but not really. Right? If the words mean nothing because they're tethered to unreachable, unknowable concepts, people can't communicate. If people can't communicate, society breaks down. When so-called Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, says all religions lead to God, he's propagating secularism and flipping it on its head. There's real wisdom there. All religions come from God, but manifest through humanity in a variety of different entity-based possessions. You know, put a little question mark there. In increasingly muddled and garbled ways. And in my studies, true Christianity is the closest to an accurate language that you'll ever find out there. I really do mean that. I really do mean that. What brought me back into Christianity first, Orthodoxy then, Novus Ordo Catholicism, is studying history. It's studying history and finding out and trying to find the root of things, applying the Socratic method to all the knowledge, the Library of Alexandria that I have at my fingertips, and still do. You know, little sections get burned every single day, but we still have the Library of Alexandria times 10 at our fingertips. And we could learn so much more. And I'm happy for you tuning in today and listening to my program, because that's what I intend on doing, is trying to help you think about things in a deeper way, you know? And maybe, who knows, maybe 10, 20 years down the line, I'll be having my notes, I'll be sitting in a nice bar stool, I'll be cracking jokes to people in a nice wine cave or something like that, and get people thinking, you know? Maybe afterwards, people come talk to me, and we have nice little discussions. Who knows, man? Who knows? But anyways, Hinduism is schizophrenic demon worship. Even if some of the Brahmins in ancient times were the first monotheists, like Zoroastrians, who bowed to the infant Christ. That's only a few of the Brahmins. Hinduism is not a monolith. India is not a monolith in any way, shape, or form. Couldn't be farther from it. Judaism was once noble, but had undergone multiple phases of reversion and revolution. Back to the original Canaanite religion of the land, to new weird golden calf manifesting, you know, stuff. Which is what Zionism ultimately is. It's falling away. It's a religion of human and even child sacrifice. Islam is a low IQ Abrahamism founded in the ultimate service of Semitic traders, cobbled together with whatever propaganda was needed to keep their population bent towards that cause, right? One of the big things that this is all going to do, and one of the big ways that helps people rationalize it all at the end of the night, is that by terrorizing the Muslim world, you can make them lose their faith. It's a stupid strategy for defeating Islam of all religions, but it's something that helps some people sleep at night, because they know that if their Calvinist faith was ever tested in such a way, they would do whatever they needed to make sure that their children were okay. Who's to say what the right choice is? I'm not God. Native American totemism is really cool and very close to God, actually. It was pre-Tengrist shamanism, which was like 25,000 years ago. But the Central American religions are among the most evil on the planet, even though they're mostly extinct at this point. I'm like 99.5% extinct at this point. As is how self-defeating religions go. Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are genius collections of socialist, atheist, cultural wisdom, you know? And were necessary to prevent the constant civil wars in ancient China, and probably the reason why China is such a monolith. And Shintoism is that, plus Ainu shamanism, plus schizophrenia. And it's fascinating to find out that Spain is still culturally contiguous, whereas England is destroyed with their streets flooded with mystery meat. When the cultures both went around the world, you know, it all comes down to their leadership. Queen Elizabeth I of England had a Kabbalist court vizier who convinced her that Britain had a holy endowment, nay, a mandate, to take all of the world for themselves. Whereas Spain exiled the Jews in 1492 at the start of their Golden Age and focused on propagating Christianity, building up the places they went to instead of breaking them down and selling out their own culture in an alchemical process, which is one of the reasons why Latin America is a staging ground for the most evil Freemasonic behavior you'll see throughout history. Mind you, it's not the Freemasons doing what's being done to the children in Gaza right now, but is the same level of violence and cruelty in what the Freemasons of America have done over hundreds of years to Latin America. You know, Fulton Sheen was a really good Catholic teacher, but only for surface level Christians. When the world and the church needed him most, he sold out to the burgeoning Novus Ordo. He loved his comfortable celebrity too much to do what was necessary, to live amongst the common like St. Athanasius. And so his work remains eternally skin deep. But like Alan Watts, sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes it's a tiny step on the right path. All right, y'all. Glad to be back. Hopefully get more frequent stuff soon. It was a nice episode. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Please take care of yourselves. Forgive your enemies. First, love God. Second, love your neighbor, even if they're annoying. All right, y'all. Cheers.